First of all, we have another round of applause for this incredible short film. I've already told you I'm really proud of you, and I think you should be so proud of this film. And I think everyone in this room can agree that it is a fantastic project. So yeah, and if it's helpful, I was the previous editorial steward, but just before Aiyana, so I'm HL as well, and I'm also a filmmaker. And I will say it is currently London Film Festival, and I think this should be in it. It's just me. But yeah, so we'll ask some questions, and then there will be a bit of time for the audience to ask some questions as well. So I haven't actually found my notes yet, but they're here. I'm just getting them. And in the meantime, do you want to give a little introduction about where the project came from? So kind of, you've spoken a bit about being editorial steward, but why did you decide to make a film? And what was the intention behind it in terms of aligning with HJL's values and strategies and everything you mentioned before?
100%. Healing, still warming up. Thank you. Healing Justice London is a really incredible organisation that I've admired for a really long time. I run a mental health organisation called Neuromancers, and the way that HGL situates themselves within somatics, the power of connecting the mind to the body to the mind, and putting that in a deeply political context is something that I found so inspirational. I'm an actor, and I've always enjoyed and loved storytelling. I'm a writer, and I think one of the most wonderful things about being on set is the collaboration. So many other filmmakers I've spoken to have aligned with that as well, but I think it's always been a reminder to me of how we can work together using our different skill sets to serve a collective vision. And to me, that's what organizing is, that's what activism is, that's what advocacy is. It's truly being in solidarity with each other. And so much of that skill set is used on a film set, but put in this capitalistic context, put in this context that prioritizes industry over artistry and profit over people. And I think it's so unfair because, at least in the context of the West, filmmaking only has really existed within the context of industrialized capitalism. It's not like theatre, it's not like music or movement, where we had an opportunity to really build a relationship to it in a different, not necessarily better, but just different social system. And so everything that we take for granted on a film set isn't something that needs to happen. We could restructure the way that we make films to ensure that everyone gets to be an artist, and to ensure that creativity and creative control doesn't belong to the people at the top of the hierarchy, to change it so there's no above and below the line. But obviously that doesn't benefit the powers that be, that doesn't benefit the big production companies and their goals of making money. So I wanted to take this practice, this art form that was taken from the people before we really got a chance to understand it, and that's not to dismiss or to say that there haven't been communities of people reclaiming the camera, but to, I think, deepen my understanding of it, put it in that politicized context. And as an actor, my first role was very luckily in The Lion King on the West End, and that is one of the only shows on the West End that has an almost entirely black and brown cast. There is nothing that I have experienced since then that has been anywhere similar to that experience. And it's not something that people really talk about. It's not something that is necessarily foregrounded. It's just felt. You just feel at home. And I think I wanted to recreate that in this set to facilitate and to hold a creative environment where people could be together, aligned in liberatory values, making art that felt meaningful and truthful and authentic to the lived experiences and stories that we were bringing. Most of the people who worked on this project were have been black and brown people. Most of the people who have worked on this project are people with lived experience of mental health, neurodivergence, people who have experienced psychiatric incarceration, who've experienced the violence of migration and immigration systems, policing, the prison system. And so we were able to kind of bring our lived experience to it, but in a non-exploitative and non-extractive way. And I'm really proud of how all these people managed to collaborate with each other in a very tight time frame, very ambitious time frame, and very tricky budget in many ways. So I'm just very grateful, and I do think that this has been a successful experimentation in the intentions that I set out.
This mic isn't working. Yeah, so I'm going to ask some questions to everyone about their, as Aiyana already introduced everybody with different roles. So I'll just go down the line. So I'll start with you, Nabila. And I think it's incredible that you've had a writer's room for this. That's, again, just like so aligned with your intentions as you just laid out. And I'd love to know from you kind of how you feel this project, sort of when you went into it, did you have a specific understanding of what it was going to be, and then when you got there, did that change? Did it surprise you? Did anything kind of, I don't know, excite you? Was it better, worse, different? I'd love to know your thoughts on kind of before, during, and after.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. So before going into it, I think because Aiyana had outlined the whole thing so meticulously that I think we were all very clear about what exactly it was about, all the way from the brief that we'd received in terms of like the research that had happened before the project began, but also the application process itself was actually really revealing in terms of what was going to happen. And it was nice to actually use that time during the application process to also think about my own creative ideas about this project. So I actually really enjoyed it. For the first time in my life, I think, I really enjoyed the application part. It was actually loads of fun. It was really creative, yeah. It was really nice to kind of prep myself almost for the writer's room. Because we only had a couple of days to do it. So it was nice to have that. But I think it was, the reason I joined it was because I think personally I'd been thinking about these things for quite a few years. About horror, what does horror look like? What does it look like to reimagine the site of horror in amongst these kind of very violent institutions, away from the way that mainstream horror is portrayed. And the part that I think I really understood whilst being on the project was the healing part. So I think that's something that I hadn't thought about properly. And I think personally for me, I've spent the past 10 years working, supporting people in immigration detention and in prisons. And I'm making this kind of, and feeling extremely burnt out in those 10 years. And I feel like it's come at such a perfect time where at the end of these 10 years, I'm thinking about what else I can do and I want to be more creative. And it allowed me the space, it was quite healing for me to be able to almost consolidate those 10 years and think about what those experiences meant and think about how that would translate in art form. And I think that it was such a nice time that we had together to be able to think about that in terms of the bigger picture, but also be able to bring my experiences into it as a writer. So yeah, the healing part I think for me was really special.
Yeah, I think it's something that because I also saw the document that Aiyana prepared ahead of time, and it is meticulous is the right word, and it's really detailed, and I think, but what it shows is that you had a really clear vision in mind for this, and I'm really interested in kind of everyone who's involved in the project of kind of how they feel that vision has kind of come to life. But I think such a big part of your vision in the first place is not just the final product of what the film was going to be about, the themes and the dialogue and all of that, but actually, like as you've sort of spoken about, the process of making it being part of the healing itself. And I think, having the artwork and the incredible kind of responses and everything, that this is such a project rather than, it's not just a film, it's a whole project that has so much to it. And I think that's what makes it so special. And speaking of a whole project, we've got to talk about sound. Freya's already told me that sound, got lots to say about sound, so we're going to hear about that. But I suppose, you know, the sound in this is, especially horror, I think sound is so important. So I'd love to know how you kind of approached conceiving of the sound design for this. I think the TikToking, for example, is so visceral. And yeah, kind of with that, holding that vision in mind, but also putting your own spin on it, how did you kind of approach this project?
Thank you. I'm a big horror fan of horror games mostly than horror films. And I think the interesting part about working on this project is that from reading the script from the very beginning, it's special in the sense that it's not the kind of gore and jump scare kind of horror, but it's horror in a very symbolic but also very real sense. Like we all get it, like physically, mentally, spiritually. So I actually did approach it in a sense to just, the sound there are not like extravagant because we don't need that much scream or noises, whatever, but it's like more subtlety, I think, going into the kind of banality of violence and oppression that we see and experience on so many levels. That, I mean, I think this is a great script and film that so many people could relate to in so many different ways. It's talking about a system, a kind of mechanism dynamic of oppression, and sound. Well, I think I'm going off track somewhere. I don't know. But I do think another thing with sound is that part of my journey with sound was from my own kind of mental health journey, where I'm super sensitive to sound. And then at moments you will feel that this is not only a medium, but a kind of operating sense, a mode of knowing and being in the world that we don't actually tap into that often. We kind of take it for granted a lot of times. But I think there's a lot of powers in sound to actually influence how you feel. Like if you go on tube, like, I don't know, Victoria or not Victoria and certain part of northern, you'll be so loud that I think everyone gets a bit deranged after train. So like to protect myself, I like wear earplugs or headphones. But also like aside from that, I think also in film, sound is such an important narrative element that it's a shame to say sometimes that if you don't notice it, that means it goes well. But but that means a lot of work has been put into making it feel smooth. So I think it's just something that we can all think about, because I do think sound also has a lot of healing potentials. Like I do sound bath with people and guided meditation, and there are people's voices and vibrations of instruments that can immediately kind of calm you down. And then there are sound that like, I don't know, I don't like phone calls. I got like events that maybe traumatic events that you associate with a certain sound of like, ooh, someone's calling me from this number, or some kind of notification sound that you would be really scared of looking into. I'm going a bit far, but
Can I add to that?
yeah, please.
I think what you were saying about the tube is really funny, and it really struck me because I think that it reminded me of where I was in the research phase of creating this project. Sound was something I really tried to consider in the development of the script. But the first phase of this project before we got to the writer's room was creative research, where I pulled on pieces of creative work from various disabled people, neurodivergent people, mad, mentally ill creatives, as well as a lot of horror films, to explore themes that connect madness and blackness and horror, because so much of the time when mental ill health is represented in film, it is the site of horror. With this, we wanted to try and flip that, try and explore the system as the site of horror. But one of the things that felt really apparent for me in that research, and as you were talking, was the fact that our societies use design of sound and set design, if you will, to create trauma, to keep us in our fear and our terror. When you grow up in a impoverished community, you don't have good infrastructure. The walls are thin. You're constantly hearing what everyone around you is doing. There's that constant interruption of your peace and well-being. You're hearing sirens because you're part of an over-policed community. Like, there's these little things, like the sound design of our communities, of our world, is really intentional. And as you were saying that about the tube, I do think that there are ways in which we could have designed our society to be more nourishing, to be more supportive. It almost feels like when they want you to travel around, they want to break you down a little bit. Like, it just feels like another layer. So that's what came up for me as you were speaking.
Well. No, sorry, go. No. Yeah, so Alex, I'd love to ask you a bit about kind of bringing it a little bit back to HJL and kind of thinking about from the HJL perspective, how you kind of felt as the process kind of went on that this project really connected with HJL's strategy and vision and values, and if that kind of changed over time and your kind of reflections now.
Pass the parcel. I just want to say, first of all, I'm just so overwhelmed with how proud of Aiyana's work and everyone who's been involved in this project. I am. And as HJL, or as I guess I'm up here representing HJL, I'm not the entirety of HJL. I feel like, yeah, for us, like being in the comms team, so I'm the community communications lead at HJL, and we have alongside SJB, who is the communications director, and the rest of the team, we've kind of sort of held this container as that is in practice for these kinds of experiments, and we don't know what we're gonna get, right? When we bring in the stewards, we're just like, okay, this is your space, do something, do something. No, just kidding. No, but like, like really like take it and run with it and like be bold. And Aiyana has really done that. So I'm just like really like, holding the depth of this vision and what you've and the clarity that everyone else has spoken to as well, the degree of like every piece being sort of intentional. And so I just really want to like honor and like say that I witnessed that and I really appreciate that. And I want to say, like, from our perspective, HJL is an organization that is about the skills, capacities and infrastructure for community-led health and healing. And what we intend for the In Practice experiment is for us to be able to kind of complicate our understandings. So can we come around over to the other side after these experiments and having complicated our understandings of community-led health and healing? And I really think this kind of fulfills that. I really think that, like, I was sitting with it and I was thinking about like what it means for, psych abolition, and kind of just even like visibilizing that the necessity of us like deepening in that work for us to be able to kind of more capaciously hold the challenges and the struggles that we need to do for us all to get free, for us all to be healthy, for us all to be well. I was thinking about somatics. So like you mentioned, our work at Healing Justice London involves somatics, embodiment. How can we be with the whole of ourselves, not just kind of minds detached from the rest of us, and land and spirit. And I think the themes in this piece really kind of allow us to look at, like, what does it mean for us to be fully with all of us, right? With the kind of parts of us that might be, I guess, pathologized, the like deep sensitization that those of us who identify with like neurodivergence or madness might experience. And so I really appreciate the film for showing that. And yeah, it's just waywardness. Like, I just really appreciate the waywardness that comes through. And also, like, I was thinking about it and I was like, the kind of way that our hero and our protagonist kind of is the one that, well, depending on how you interpret it, right, is the one that does the violence, or the overt violence that we see. And I think also that framing really kind of is necessary for us in our sort of stories, in terms of like us kind of really kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Giving ourselves space and room to like be attacking our oppressor back and in our power. And so, yeah, just big up. Yeah.
I also, off the back of that, have to big up the actors and the performers for holding the nuances of all of those names. The fear, like, and the tensions of the characters. You didn't hear names, but we have Toby, who's our protagonist, and we have the professional, who's the professional. And the performers did such a great job at holding the tensions, and I think that we tried to offer something that wasn't as black and white as like oppressor bad and oppressed good. And the oppressed person is resisting through their own means in their own way, as you may interpret it. It's up to you. And the professional has their own kind of story and tension with empire and with sitting in that role. And so we wanted to create something for our communities that could spark conversation in our communities. I think sometimes in the mainstream, when we do get art that speaks to systems of oppression and that maybe begins to set society as that site of horror, it can be very watered down and a very kind of simplistic idea of what that looks like in reality. And so I think that was what we wanted to sort of speak to through the writer's room, in terms of complicating our understandings of health, of healing, and what that looks like for the oppressed and the oppressor in all of us.
I'd love to know a bit about where you see this film going. This is probably a question for everybody, actually. What you kind of hope it might do and who it might reach. And I think it's really interesting you've talked about how, all the crew and cast and people with lived experience of the themes and the issues that are in the film. But I suppose I'd love to get your kind of thoughts on, if it's people with lived experience that's your main audience, do you want this to reach a more mainstream audience, people that have never been involved in the system, and who are you kind of speaking to, and is that something that you think is important to have in mind throughout the process of making it, or is that something you're actually not that bothered about? Is it is this project more about making the art and the process that was involved and the love and the care that went into it, and it goes wherever it goes?
It's a good question. Really should have read your questions. Process the better. I think there's value in both. I think that my focus was on the intentions of this process, and my commitment was to the people involved. I think so often I've been on sets and the commitment is not to your crew and cast, it's to your stakeholders, it's to the people with the money, it's to the people who are going to be paying the money to make you back your money. So I wasn't really thinking about the audience throughout this process. I wanted to honor what everyone was bringing, and I wanted it to feel collaborative in that way. But as I reached the end of my stewardship and as the film, is getting ready to be shared publicly beyond this screening today, that is something I have to consider. I think my main feelings are kind of two things. Number one is that this is a project that will continue beyond the stewardship because people can always return to explore like the process of it via the HTL website. They can always go on the internet when it's released and watch the film and engage with it for months and years to come. And I think that's the case with any piece of art that you put into the world. The audience can be as much a part of the art as the artists. But my hope or my intention is really just that the film is found by or finds the people that need it, the people that are in that moment where they need this as a healing, or they need this as a horror to wake them up, to challenge them in some way. I don't think I have a specific audience in mind. I just hope it reaches the people that it needs to. Is that your thinking, stroking?
I should really have an answer to this, innit? I'm gonna be let me. I mean, I can say a little bit about Healing Justice London comms because I think that kind of is at least at first where we're going to be putting it out, and yeah, I've been talking about comms in various different meetings all day today, so I'm also a little bit burnt out, but I think this is sort of necessary, and I think one of the things that I start with our Healing Justice London comms is thinking about the sort of oppressive media environment that we're putting this out into, right? And that we always kind of try to situate ourselves very intentionally. We try to basically be strategic and creative about the ways that we get this to where we want it to go. And so I guess, the piece that's relevant in relation to like it traveling and it being out there in the world is basically for it to kind of it's right on the edge, but it's also not coming. Because basically what I want to say is like our entire comms infrastructure is set up in a way to allow for bold experiments. Like that's how we have to do comms in this landscape, in this kind of so this is like a little, maybe the nerdiness in me coming out, but like I was learning about how the way that comms initially was set up, or communications, it came from colonizers initially kind of, okay, now we've conquered the land, so then the next step is for us to conquer the mindsets, the psyches of the people. And so thinking about like that origin of communications, we're really like trying to flip, and how can comms come from the colonized, and so how can it really kind of have that kind of decolonial aspect to it. And so I just really echo all of the stuff that you were saying, Aiyana, about I hope it reaches the people that will connect to it. But I guess I just wanted to add in that piece there about like we're going to be really intentional about what the media environment that it's going out into, and we'll have to think really carefully about how we push it out.
I think communications of the colonizer is definitely one piece of it, but I think the goal of the project was communications of the people, and that storytelling is an incredibly powerful tool, and I think that's what the third character that you would have seen, the messenger, is what we call that character, really represented. Our histories, our cultures, our experiences, our alternate selves, if you will, and surfacing those stories, those realities. And I think the significance, the value of communications is something that I've really absorbed through working with HJL on this project. And the value of communication as a general practice for movement, for artists, but also fostering that as an embodied value on set, and hopefully ensuring that everyone who worked on this project felt that their work was effectively represented and cared for.
I think we'll open up to some audience questions if anyone has anything. I don't think there's another mic, so you can just shout. And it can be for a specific person or a general question. Any questions? Yes.
I have a question about the sound choices. The first thing that came to my mind was hearing like how the actors were mic'd. There was almost like this like kind of slightly tinny, kind of like muffled quality about the microphones that were given to them. I want to know, was that purely just like a stylistic choice, or was there like a narrative, like symbolic intention behind that?
So a bit of technical details that we used both mostly lavs, sound from the lavalier, sound from the boom, and some small parts from the lavs. And the lavs, because it's in the clothes, I didn't do the sound recording, Amaya's did it, that there would be naturally a muffled sound to it. But I did kind of, because it's an enclosed space, and you don't know how big the room is. And I did kind of feel like to add a bit of kind of constrainment to how the sound is heard. And yeah, that's my thought.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
More questions? Yes.
It was a great film, so let's start there. I just wanted to ask actually about the collaborative process. I think it's really special that you had a writer's room on shore, but also that you made two different mediums, both for the animated version and the, not version, but iteration, and the film. So I was curious to know, how collectively did you work on that? Was this the plan from the beginning, or was it something that you kind of found would further, or I guess, bring out the best in the project?
For sure. So the proposal that I made for this was in 5 different phases. 5.1 was creative research, where I basically gave myself an excuse to watch a lot of horror films. And also deepen my knowledge and revise my understanding of, psychiatric abolition and prison abolition, and explore those themes more deeply. Part 2 was the radical writers' room, so that's where we developed the story. Part 3 was pre-production and production. We shot it all in one day. And there were lots of things that went wrong as usual, but we managed it, and it was an incredible experience. And post-production. Post-production and artist in conversation is phase 4. And so that was developing sound design, that was the color grade, that was the editing, and then sending that off to some selected responding artists who got an early preview of the film and got to create their work in response. And so there was no specific intention for us to create an animation. It's just that he is an incredible animator and super talented, and we wanted to show that in response to the film and celebrate that work. But the responding art could have been anything, and the reason why I wanted to have that as part of the process was to kind of create an accountability and to make sure that we had more ways of engaging with the film to offer once everything has have been completed. We're now in phase 5, which is called screening and celebration in my proposal. So you're all part of that as your questions, and I hope that answers yours.
I've actually got a follow-up question, sort of more on the collaboration, particularly about the writers' room. It's really interesting, I think, as Malia said, about having a writers' room for a short film is amazing. And maybe it'd be helpful to kind of get a bit of insight about kind of what went down in the writers' room, because I think, you know, the difference between the discussion and then the actual script writing, because my understanding is you didn't write the script in the writers' room. So I'd love to know kind of what that discussion was like sort of, yeah, a bit of behind the scenes of the writers' room would be really helpful.
So it was the first writers' room that I've done, and I feel like it set my expectations way too high now, that if I do anything else, it's just not going to meet the same kind of level of detail and things that we managed to do in 3 days. It was really nice actually having Healing Justice. Alex and Nishma came and they did lots of semantic exercises with us, which was really nice to kind of start with that as a way of kind of feeling quite embodied through the process, but also feeling quite connected with everyone else in the room as well. Because I know I came in and I was very nervous and I was like all in my head. So it was nice to kind of feel quite grounded as we started the process. And I kept thinking, I was like, I'm not sure how we're going to do this. We have 3 days. Are we all going to go off and think of different ideas and come back and then the best idea wins? Or, like, you know, I had no idea what was going to happen. But actually what we did was, and I really admire the facilitation that you did, Anna, because I felt like we started just by thinking about our ideas of horror and healing just generally, in like a really broad sense, what it meant to us personally, our own experiences of it. And then slowly we went down to the details of what the film would look like. And by the 3rd day, I think, we were starting to write small scenes and like adding bits and details. So it was incredible, and I hadn't really imagined that it would work out like that. But it was so good to start with the bigger picture, almost, and our understanding of how we've seen horror in our lives and the ways that we've had interactions with like very violent systems within society, and how it's played out in our, and for me it was quite nice to think about, like, for example, the room that we have in this, how it can be a psych ward, it can be a detention center, it can be a prison, it can be a school even. And so it was nice to have those discussions between us of the experiences that we've had and collect it all together and then go down to the finer details. Yeah.
Any more questions from the audience? Go to the back and then 1, 2, 3.
Oh, so good. Thank you so much again. I have a question about the voices. I think that was a part of the film that really struck me. And I guess we live in a world where like voices in your head is quite pathologized and it's seen as something to, I guess, criminalize in a way as well. And I really liked how at the end it flipped to be almost like a spiritual sense of like, it could be ancestors that are with you. Well, that's how I interpreted it. Like, we are here, and that's a big scary thing. So yeah, I just wanted to ask you about writers about thought process.
Okay. I feel like this is a question for the first 3 of us. Yeah, I think we really wanted to play with that, and it's really nice to know that that part of it was successful in terms of flipping expectations. We did talk about the pathologization of voices and the fact that voices are actually kind of a bit of a horror trope in a way, and used as a site of horror. And this phrase, "we are here," could be interpreted as quite disturbing and quite scary. It's only really as the film goes on that you reveal that maybe this is a good monster. This is a monster on the side of the character that we're on the side of. And I think it was really about playing with this idea of monstrosity and the fact that monstrosity is very subjective. What is a monster to people who are aligned with oppression are maybe the heroes of people who are not, and vice versa. And, you know, the pathologization of various groups of people as monsters, as terrorists, as aliens. So yeah, I think that was something that I had considered in my research that we brought into the writers' room and really like made that a specific thing. And I think Freya did a great job of bringing that to life.
Do you want to add to that? I was just
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was really fun. And to me, I think there are two aspects to the voices. First, when the voices come in, it's almost like a different time space, because well, in the process of how I work, all the room ambience is gone, the clock ticking that you actually, if you paid attention, it's across the whole film. And that's a kind of signal of, you can say, institutional time, or the kind of reality walls, box time. And then the voices come in with a more liberatory forces. It can be interpreted as, I think, inner voices or ancestral voices or spiritual voices. And I think it's just, that touches, well, it's good that I'm jumping on my second point, which is about kind of, I think it's a spot for, that can be both horror and healing for people, because we all know the concept of we have an inner voice or a kind of hunch about things. There will be a voice that kind of protects you a lot of times. But there will also be, I think there's this, capitalism has, and all the colonialism and patriarchy has trained our brain to speak louder than our heart. And our brain works in the process of, fear, because he wants to survive. That's why he plans, and that's why he's anxious. And that's the kind of voices that you can also identify. But there are other voices that come from your heart, that you have such a strong alignment with it. And then at the moment when you hear, because I do a lot of meditations, and I told people that I could distinguish between those voices, and they're like, oh, how do you do that? Like, it's easy. Like, first of all, what are they saying? Are they amplifying fear or amplifying your agency or love and ability to make better things in the world? That's an easy one. And another one is just to observe your body, because when you know voices that come from your heart, you soften, because you almost enter into a space of trust and love and bliss that empower you. And then I think in the film, it's also like, especially how I worked with, kind of diminishing the scream, but kind of foregrounding the voices, is also thinking about, I love this quote from Peter Levine, who does somatic experiencing and does a lot of work on trauma. He says, trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens to you in the lack of an empathetic witness. So I think it's also to think about what are our mental realities, because they actually inform our system, nervous system, and our bodies more than sometimes the material reality. And they kind of, it's a feedback. Oh, I could go on all day about this.
Sorry, it took me a while to process that question. But I was just thinking about some of the things that we were thinking about when we were creating this character, the ancestor character, the messenger. And I think it was about, there's a scene where the protagonist is basically saying, I'm doing everything you've asked me to do. I'm trying to fit into all the boxes that you have given me, and yet that's still not really allowing me to break free from all of this. It's not giving me the liberation that I really want. And I think what we wanted to do was to show how the parts of us that are pathologized and are deemed as like either criminal or that put us into these kind of institutions are the parts of us that ultimately liberate us as well. It's the parts that, if we really lean into those parts and we try to harness the kind of power that we can get from this like spiritual, otherworldly aspects that get seen in these kinds of ways by these institutions, they are the things that will liberate us. And that's why it's so nice that like after a point, she you can hear the voices getting louder and louder because that's what she's doing. She's kind of like holding on to the parts of us, the parts of herself that are trying to be shut down by the institution.
Release us.
Release.
Exactly.
I think it's also worth adding that on the day we had quite a few people on set record their voices to be the voices of the ancestors, and some of them are in the audience. So thank you to those people.
I think there was another question here. Yeah.
It's quite a specific question. So I picked up on the Octavia Butler quote, and I was curious, at what point in the creation of the film was that quote something that came up? Like, was it something that was embedded into the script, or was it something that was kind of in post-production, like, oh, this fits with the narrative? Like, at what point did that quote make its way into the creative process?
That quote was found during the research process and was written into the script. It's from, I'm going to forget the title, but it's from an Octavia Butler book that is science fiction. And I believe that quote is actually said by an alien species who have found humans basically and got them as their pets, is like the gist, and is saying it to a human who is like this chosen leader of the humans. And I thought it was really interesting because it's like this alien species seeing this like fetishizing and monstrosizing a human at the same time. And I think it's, I'm not going to go on that tangent, but I think it's really interesting when I think about humans in the context of everything. We put ourselves on such a huge pedestal. It's interesting to think of us being oppressed by species beyond us. I'm not going to go on a tangent about AI. I'm not going to go on a tangent about AI.
You should read. We should find the name of the book. It's
Yes,
it's a fascinating book.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask? You want the mic?
I wouldn't be loud enough. Firstly, I just want to say congratulations to all of you. And my heart space is so emotional and so inspired. And so I just really want to I'm kind of floored and deeply moved. And I think it's to you, Aiyana, but also to you, Molly, because you're both filmmakers and you've both also been editorial stewards. And what I saw in the horror beauty contradiction that you held so well was also comedy, and being visual artists in this moment where everything we see feels like, can we believe this, can we trust this? And then here you are suspending reality and inviting us to play, imagine, connect with our own understanding and interpretation. And I think as filmmakers, as visual artists, your role is very critical for how we image and imagine the world. So I'd love for you to share a bit about your art form and what you're seeing for how we imagine differently in this moment.
This is why Farzana is the executive director of H&L. Do you want to go first?
No.
Oh. I think there's a lot of interesting conversation about the value of filmmaking and visual storytelling and art making in terms of revolution, in terms of in terms of influencing culture. I think that films have always had the incredible ability to do that, but I think it's up to the audience to decide how it impacts them. Get Out, for example, is only Get Out because of the way that the audience responded to it. So I think when it comes to visual storytelling, when it comes to filmmaking, my plea is always with the audience, because the audience, like the people, have technically the most power, as much as the people with arguably more resources can convince us that they are stronger. We have the say, we have the influence. And I hope that if people are engaging with visual art, that they are absorbing that they're talking about it, that they're thinking critically about it. I hope that we can move away from a culture of consuming and towards a culture of being in conversation with. I hope that this film can offer that to people. I hope that the future films I make, touch the wood, can offer that to people as well. And I think that I am sitting with a Nina Simone quote that I can half remember, and I'm going to very much paraphrase, around it's the artist's responsibility to reflect the times. But I think everybody's time is their own time. So reflect your own stories and don't let their time subdue or overtake your own. That your story, your perspective, your experience, your narrative is valuable, and that you don't have to have a finished ending. You don't have to have the answers. The value is in the exploration and the conversation that can come within and around it.
Yeah, I think I have another quote that's not traceable as far as I know, but the idea that, art doesn't change the world, but art changes people and people change the world. And I think that is really important. My perspective of sort of having seen so many, I watch a lot of short films in particular, and being a couple of film festivals and things, I think what often happens, and we've probably seen this if you've seen what happened at Cannes, I think it was Cannes or Venice, and they have these films which actually Renee and I both just saw today, The Voice of Henry Rajab, which is an incredibly moving film, and it was like a 25-minute standing ovation, and that's really great, but then what? That didn't change things in the way that things needed to change. And so I think what I sometimes get frustrated by is the kind of lack of movement within the film world, but there's a lot of self-congratulation, a lot of patting each other and ourselves on the back. And I think what's so special about this project is actually the process that you went through in the making of it was actually as important as the finished product. And I think that it's not just rare, it just doesn't happen at all. And I think that I'm sort of at the point where I'm a bit bored of seeing films that are, I guess I'm talking not all of them, but there are, lots that are sort of oh, well, this is a social commentary, and then sort of in Spanish we say punto, that's it. There's nothing left after that. And I think what I would love is for filmmaking as an art and as a medium itself to become part of the process of liberation, so that, and the reason I asked about the audience, because I think sometimes making a film with an audience in mind, which is what, that's what Marvel is, that's what all these big Hollywood blockbusters are, actually isn't the right process. And you're talking about a lot about the commercialization of an art form. And I was at a talk recently with a couple of big distribution companies, and they were talking about film, and it could have been a product in a box. So the way they were talking about it was how do we sell this, and how how people asking how do I get my film distributed, but they could have been saying how do I get my, I don't know, water bottle or whatever. It really didn't matter what the thing was, and you have to go right back to the root of what art is, and film in particular, and the way that film can do things that other art can't do, and the same that other art can do things that film can't. And I think the process of collaboration and making it sort of we need to swap the hierarchy around, so that becomes more important. You've spoken so much about the healing and the liberation that's involved in the making of the film, and I'm personally in awe of this whole project. And you will be making more films. There's no doubt about that. I think we have to wrap up for now. So I would just love to invite another huge round of applause for this incredible team.